All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a real treat tonight on Sportswire Radio. It's Friday night. We're basically in our minds the middle of the weekend, and our guest is certainly one of, how can I put this in a respectful way, one of the most accomplished wrestlers we have ever had on Sportswire Radio. He has wrestled a who's who of opponents from the likes of J.D. Knight, Davey Boy Smith Jr., Doug Williams. I could even go on and on and on. He has wrestled in 40 different companies. He has held over a dozen championships. He is the man behind Aspire Wrestling. He is also a fitness coach now. But most importantly, we are going to see him in the ring upcoming tomorrow night as a part of Aspire Wrestling Alliance's huge show, and he's going to be in the ring against No Fun Done, and also against our very good friends over at NBPW. He is going to be in the ring with a dream opponent for many, Johnny Storm. He needs no further introduction on Sportswire Radio, but because he is with us here for the first time, he's going to get that usual treatment that we give everybody else. So with that, wait for it. Further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, pro wrestling star, the Warrior, Paul Malen. My friend, how are you?
Wow. First of all, Tom, thanks for having me. And here is a massive, massive, massive round of applause for that introduction right there. I hope this show does it justice. That's all I can say about that. Thank you.
From somebody like yourself who's been in this game since 2005 is saying that is a tremendous appreciation from you, and it's certainly a tremendous amount of kind words. But we'll get into that, I'm sure, another time, another place. But I want to get right to the nuts and bolts here. You're going to be in the ring coming up at the anniversary show for our very good friends over at NBPW. That's going to take place 2 weeks from today. And in a lot of ways, you're going to be in a dream match, the Warrior Paul Malen. You're going to be in the ring with Johnny Storm. And Johnny Storm, listen, I've had on a who's who of wrestlers here in the UK from Sportswire Radio my 4.5 years. And this is a match that alone should just sell the show. So, I mean, talk about, for those that are listening and watching here on Sportswire Radio, what we can expect with you and Johnny Storm.
Well, it's been a few years since I've been in the ring with Johnny Storm. This is not a first-time encounter for us. In fact, it's probably been around 10 years since we've been in the ring with each other.
Right, 2012, right? About 2012?
Sometime around then, yeah, I think so. But anybody that follows professional wrestling, not only in the UK, but from your side of the pond and just world traveled, everybody will know that Johnny Storm has been there. He's done that. CZW, Ring of Honor, countless companies, countless countries. This man is a world traveled star. And there's nothing that I like to do more than to get in the ring with somebody that I know can go. I know for a fact Johnny Storm can go, and I'm really, really looking forward to going nose to nose, toes to toes, and stepping it up, really amping it up, and hopefully getting into contention for that MVP championship.
I have no doubt that you'll do that, but I find this interesting for a couple of different reasons, because obviously you guys have history, which we spoke about here in the introduction. So have you, in a way, gone back to the tape or thought about the last time that you guys were in a ring to kind of get yourself in that mindset, that frame of mind, what we'll see 2 weeks from now at the anniversary show? Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. I mean, anybody. So tomorrow I'm wrestling No Fun Done.
We're going to get to that in a little while. Sure.
In a couple of weeks' time, I'm wrestling the Wonder Kid, Johnny Storm. That means that I've been doing my studying. I've studied tapes. I've studied YouTube. I've been in the ring with Johnny Storm, but I know for a fact that he's probably had to change his game moving on throughout the years. And so have I. Johnny Storm's not going to be stepping into the ring with the same Paul Malen that he did 10 years ago. I'm a lot fitter now, can go a lot faster and a lot stronger. So I just hope that he's been studying also, because I definitely have.
Oh, absolutely. No question about that. And I want to say hello here to a couple of people. First, I want to give a shout out on YouTube for my very good friend Skulls the Soul Hunter from California, formerly of the EWA from Now Wrestling Championship Entertainment. So hello to you, Skulls. But you said a couple different things. And yes, absolutely, you've changed. You've obviously become a better wrestler, a more experienced wrestler since then, back in 2012. So, I mean, in a way, going back to the tape, does it maybe in a way where you focus on maybe what you did in your mind? It could be different from everybody else, but maybe some things that you did not so good to kind of maybe say those are the things I'm not going to do, so that way I can have an even better match that I will, and certainly maybe come up here with a huge W, as you pointed out, to get into title contention here in NBPW.
So for me, originally back in the day, it would to be try to catch Johnny off guard and work around my strengths and try and stay away from his strengths. So obviously Johnny Storm was a massive high flyer back in the day.
Sure.
We're 10 years across now, so his game might have changed a little bit, but my plan is to cut him off at the roots, to take out a leg if I have to, maybe stop him from being able to do a lot of this aerial offense that he likes to do. But like I said, Johnny doesn't realize that I'm probably a lot faster than I was originally. So maybe I can outfly and I can outspeed the Wonder Kid also.
You know, it's funny you said that. And I want to talk about the fact that you, in a way, I think, because you do things differently, actually become a more mature wrestler, maybe not so much a better wrestler, but you learn to do things differently. You kind of have to adapt, right? Because not everybody's going to be able to do the same things they did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because obviously you put your body through a lot of punishment, a lot of pain, and also, you know, different things happen. There's an old adage in life that every 10 years, your body ages. So from your 20 to 30, and then you
Absolutely.
hit 40, it's almost like, okay, now I have to start doing things differently. So for you, in a way, is that kind of ring true? And maybe that's kind of helps you evolve or mature almost in a way as a wrestler?
Absolutely. You just put it right there. Evolve. It's natural progression. You can't do the same thing over and over and over. Your body will not allow it, especially with wrestling, training, you know, whatever you have to do to get the job done. For me, I'm a lot smarter of a wrestler now than I was 10 years ago. And I know what I can do. And most importantly, I know to stay away from my weaknesses. That's the main thing with here. I mean, obviously, I don't want to give the game plan away too much because he may be watching this show. He may turn up on the 30th and be like, I know exactly everything you're going to do because you gave everything away. But for me, he's definitely going to turn up and he's going to be wrestling a different performer than he did back in the day.
Oh, for sure. And I'm glad you said that, because I always say that to wrestlers sometimes that come on here. I say, when I told John Allen this, who came on here a couple weeks ago, I said, whatever you do, don't tell us what you're going to do there in the ring. And I want to say hello to a few people from NBPW. First, my guest coming up before the June 30th show, the day prior, Young Horace. Good evening, gentlemen. Huge shout out to Young Horace, one of my favorites. Skulls says, I always like the Johnny Saint British style wrestling. Good point there, Skulls. Also, a shout out to the Necessary Evil, Mr. Palmer himself. He says, good evening. So I do want to ask you a couple different things about NPPW, because I realize I only have so much time with you. You're obviously a legend. I mean, I could ask you a million questions, but you have some veterans, obviously Martin Kirby, Tommy Rocker, John Allen's your old foe from a few years back. And then you have some different wrestlers like a Young Horace, who's become kind of one of my favorites here on Sportswire, kind of an up-and-coming wrestler. He's been in a number of different places. He's going up the ladder. He wants to be in a place where you're at, certainly Mr. Storm, Mr. Rocker, everybody else here. So do you find yourself, in a way, in NBPW giving advice to some of the up-and-comers? Do you kind of take on that role that maybe early in your career, different guys might have given you that advice to be where you're now the locker room leader? I mean, talk to me about some of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you pointed out earlier, I started out in 2005. And when I started out in 2005, wrestling was a lot harder to get into than it is today.
Oh, absolutely. I remember, listen, one of the guys you squared off with a long time ago, Reynaldo, a good buddy of mine, who I actually met, he talked about the fact when we started around the same time you did, he had to go to Canada, Hamilton, Ontario, to learn how to train. It was a totally different world back in those days.
There weren't many wrestling training schools. So for me, the town that I lived in, there wasn't a wrestling training school. So I would have to travel 3 hours to get to a school. And by the time I'd finished my training, a school opened locally to me. So you guess that kind of look right there. But I don't regret that for a second, because it taught me that traveling the miles was really important to start with. Now you get guys that don't want to travel an hour away from their house because it's too far away.
Sure.
So that I'm glad I had that education right from the very start, but try not to move too far off topic with this. I do find myself in that position. And I really appreciate the position where I'm in, where people can come to me and ask for advice. Or, Paul, did you watch my match? What do you think I could do differently? And I always try to be openly as honest as I can be. And one thing I have found, it's not the advice that you want to hear that is the best advice. The best advice are those words that cut you deep, and it's like, I thought I was doing everything right. Actually, I wasn't, because they're the lessons that taught me. And there's an old saying here, some lessons can't be taught, they must be learned. And I've learned the hard way a lot of things throughout life. And like you pointed out, MVP has a very varied roster. Like myself, yes, the Wonder Kid Johnny Storm, Martin Kirby, those guys have been around for a long, long time. And then up and comers, like you've mentioned, Juggernaut John Allen's that's been around for a few years, but he still has a lot to learn. He also has a championship that I've got my eyes on. Also,
I'm going to talk about Mr. Allen. Yep, certainly. Mr. Allen is no stranger to us on Sportswire.
Yeah, I do like being in that position where I can give advice and hopefully steer people away from the mistakes that I made many years ago.
Wow, listen, you've had a lot of success. I mean, listen, you've held over a dozen championships. You've wrestled in 40 companies and counting. So, I mean, at the end of the day, those mistakes, certainly, you've done okay. But I always have to ask you a question, because I asked this a lot to different people. And I asked this to Reynaldo when he came on after he had won the LWF title. Do you look back on your career and say, wow, in 2005, I didn't think that here we are today in 2023, that I would be this guy that would be in all these different companies, wrestle a who's who of people? Do you ever kind of stop and think back to those early days to kind of where you are now?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the main things I look back on from my first couple of years is, why the hell did I do that? I look back and I think, what the hell were you thinking? But I look back on it now and I always think, like, wow, like, for all the people that I've wrestled, all the experiences that I've had, all the good times and all the bad times, I'm always very appreciative of that, because there's a lot of people that are way worse off right now. There's a lot of people that want to be a part of it, but physically can't or mentally can't. And I'm quite lucky to have had a very, very long 18-year career so far. And I'm always appreciative. I'm appreciative to the people that taught me from the very get-go as well. Like, a lot of people that I owe a lot to, for the lessons that they taught me over the years.
Absolutely, no question about that. And I want everybody, if you're out there, to go follow our friends over at New British Promotions Wrestling and BP Wrestling. They have a huge show coming up June the 30th, a huge anniversary celebration. It's going to be at the Wakefield Rycroft Leisure. It's going to be off Mulberry Avenue in Rye Hill. You can also get tickets, and that was for £8 for adults, £6 for kids. Front row is £10. Family ticket, £19 only. Doors open at 6:30, 7 o'clock is match time. It will end no later than 9:15 p.m. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen, right? You go out there, like I just went to the movies and spent, I don't know, £40, give or take, between popcorn, soda, and the ticket. You can go and watch the likes of Paul Malen, John Allen's the Juggernaut, the King of Old School champion, Tommy Rocker, the NBPW champion, Martin Kirby, Young Horace, a who's who of other wrestlers, and bring your family just for £19. That's one of the best deals around. That's why you need to follow NBPW. And I have a few comments here from Palmer himself before I get back to Mr. Malen. Good evening, Mr. Malen. Putting in the miles as important now as it ever was. And it's not just the miles you travel, it's the miles you put on your body when training. It's the time spent building rings and helping out. Put in the miles, put in the work, reap the rewards. Absolutely. Listen, no question about it. Listen, anything you do in life, if you put the work in, hard work will definitely pay off. And there's no question that NBPW is going to be one of those companies that we look back on. But, I know you get asked about a lot of things here, and I'll go to them certainly. But, do you give advice, let's say, to those in NBPW who are starting out here? They've had some success here of late. They're an up-and-coming company. You've obviously been in 40 companies plus. You've seen the pitfalls. You obviously have Aspire Wrestling. I'll talk about that in a second. Do you find yourself as somebody with as accomplished experience that you have been in different promotions that you wind up giving advice at all? Or what's your thoughts on that from a promotion standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, the list of the people, I don't want to name drop too many people, but the people that I've been in the ring with, I've learned countless lessons from. And like I pointed out earlier, I've learned a lot from my mistakes. And I like to watch every match on the card if I can. So if once I've had my match, you'll see me sat at the curtain watching the other matches. Or if there's a monitor, I'll be sat at the monitor watching the matches. But I don't like to go to people when they come through the curtain and say, listen, I watch your match, I have advice for you. I like them to come to me to ask, because sometimes you'll go and say, I have this advice, and then somebody will be like, I don't want advice. No, thank you. And I was like, okay.
But I would find that hard to fathom. You are the warrior, Paul Malen. You've been in the ring with JD Knight. You've been in the ring with, obviously, Davey Boy Smith Jr., Doug Williams. I mean, I could go on all day. I mean, Reynaldo years back in Future Shock. I mean, there's a whole list of names. So I would almost have to say it would be like offensive if some wrestler said, no, I don't want advice from you. I mean, you've held over a dozen championships. You've been in 40 plus companies. You've been a fitness trainer. You have your own company. I mean, I would be almost like find that laughable in a sense. But it almost reminds me, there was an old interview I listened to years ago from Scott Hall, and Scott Hall said the same thing you said. He said, I would go back and I would like to watch all the matches, even if I wasn't going on till near last, like you, a main eventer, and I would like to talk with the wrestlers and kind of give them my feedback on maybe what they can do and maybe what they didn't do and how they could fix it. It's almost like, in a way, there's an old adage called constructive criticism. And in a lot of ways, that's what I think you do. And that's why I think you're so valuable here to the company. And I want to say hello to some more people. Skull says hard work equals championship. I want to give a big shout out to my friends in Ohio, DKW, Dark Cryptic Wrestling. They have a big show coming up July the 1st. And they say afternoon, we'll have more coverage with them July the 29th. And I want to give a big shout out to NBP Wrestling. Please follow them on YouTube as well. Paul is one of the very best trainers in the UK. The knowledge that he's passed on to his trainees and how open he is with providing advice is a great credit to any locker room. And so let's talk about Aspire Wrestling, the Alliance. You're obviously a trainer. You're a coach there. Talk about, for those that are listening and watching, because I have a lot of different people that are hearing you for the first time. Even though you're well-versed, well-accomplished, there's a lot of different people, different wrestlers that are going to watch this later on. And what made you want to transition from being this active wrestling star to a guy that also wanted to give back? Talk to me about that for those that are listening on Sportswire.
To be quite honest with you, it's not exactly a transition that I planned. I kind of fell into the position, which around 2016, around that time, had a daughter on the way. So I didn't exactly want to be on the road too often then. So it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? And a new school was opening, and I was approached by the owner, and it was called the Aspire Wrestling Alliance in a town called Derby in England, in the Midlands.
I know Derby very well, actually. I've had a lot of wrestlers from different UK towns. At this point, I'm actually well-versed in Swinton, Morecambe, Chorley. I mean, I could go on. Barrow. I mean, so listen, Yorkshire, different York. So I know a lot of them. I've been doing this 4.5 years, so trust me, I'm very, very well versed with the UK. So you're speaking the truth. Go ahead.
And so with me, and I remember when I was approached about it, that this is a different kind of school, though, because the man that approached me said that this school was directed at helping people that suffered with mental health, people that come from rough backgrounds that kind of need an outlet to channel anger, depression, and such. And when he first approached me about it, I was like, there's not a chance in hell this is going to work. And I was completely wrong, because I have been there and I'm still there now. And it's gone from strength to strength. We currently not only are a wrestling school, but we help the local community. So back in the day when the first lockdown happened, when the global pandemic started, the wrestling school stopped and we became a food bank. And you had wrestlers and you had the staff going around in cars, delivering food to the local community, the people that needed help. The students were helped with this also. And with this, it just goes to show, like, now I teach kids wrestling. We've worked with Children in Need. If you don't know what it is, that's a massive charity in the UK. Children in Need, we've been featured on the BBC News twice. Sure. We've had local funding from the local police, Children in Need. And right now, the school's still going strong, and it is still a local food bank and a community shop. We currently have also lots of user groups in there helping the local community, lots of people with disabilities. And it's a hub. The wrestling school is a hub for lots of local charities that come in to help everybody. And I seriously doubt you will find another wrestling school out there I say wrestling, a wrestling school out there that does the things that the Aspire Wrestling Alliance does.
Yeah, it's very important that I think you talked about that, because in a lot of ways, and especially in these towns here in the UK, I think you can do a lot more than just being a wrestling coach or having a school. I think it's different in the sense than, let's say, if you're like me in New York or in some other American city or a little small town, because I've always felt it's different in a lot of these places because we don't get those opportunities in the UK that we get here in the United States. So the fact that you can take on this role here, and how has that impacted you in terms of who you are as a person, to have almost this role that in a lot of ways is more than just being this wrestling star that we've seen you on YouTube with thousands and thousands of views and everything else and all these championships. So how has that maybe changed you as an individual in the role that you've taken on behalf of the community?
Oh, it's like I said to you, I fell into the job, and for me, like I said originally, I was like, this isn't going to work, and that was the wrong way of thinking. And it just goes to show, like, back then I needed some serious education, and I've had that, and I'm a completely different person now, and there's no better feeling than seeing somebody work hard, somebody say to me that they can't do something, and then months down the line me say to them, do you remember when you told me you couldn't do this? Well, you were wrong, weren't you? And I was right. For example, a couple of students, one of my students is a registered blind man, and so this registered blind man told me that he would never be able to climb to the top rope. He'd never be able to lose 28 pounds. And right now, I can show you video footage of this man doing a top rope superfly splash. Yeah.
Wow.
And this guy can see this far away from his face. And he is one of the most accomplished grapplers that I've ever known. I would not allow this man to get a hold of me, because I knew if he got a hold of me, he would tie me up in knots and he would finish me off. Another example, I have a 7-year-old student named Junior, and this boy has no fear. He is more technically sound than 90% of the roster on my shows, because he's put in the hard work, and he is 7 years old. And he keeps saying to me, Paul, when am I going to be on shows? And I'm like, you got a long time to wait, my friend. I'm sorry you do. And for me, again, there's no better feeling than watching people improve themselves, both physically, in the ring, and most of all mentally. That's really important these days.
Well, those are reasons why, ladies and gentlemen, you need to follow the Aspire Wrestling Alliance on Instagram at Aspire Wrestling Alliance. Also, the Warrior Paul Malen. Please follow him, Paul Malen 1 on Instagram. Also, PB Malen 1 on Twitter. Also, give him a follow on Facebook, along with our very good friends over at New British Promotions Wrestling. I have a huge show again coming up here on June the 30th. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. If you are on Sportswire Radio out there on Facebook or YouTube, please continue to give us a like and follow out there. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Sportswire Radio. Thankful for a lot of new subscribers out there, and we'll have more coverage here later on tonight with guys from the IMF, so stay tuned for that. Here I have some more comments. Mr. Palmer says, it was an honor to do one of your seminars, Mr. Malen. If any young wrestler is watching, this is definitely a man you can learn from a man who has certainly made his bones in British wrestling. And Skulls also points out, when I'm not wrestling, I help the Special Olympics out. Paul Malen, I was told that all my life due to my disability, and I couldn't do it, but I proved them wrong. So great stuff there, Skulls.
Okay.
But I mean, so I have to ask you, I will ask you a couple of questions on some big names in a second, but what do you then, you've done this for 19 years. You're now going to be here in NBPW. We have a big match with Mr. Storm. And I ask this question to wrestlers all the time, especially a guy like yourself, who's literally, done it all. I lost count. I could go on all day about all the championships you've won, all the matches. I feel like I was back in university, and I went on a crash collision course. So I crammed in all of your matches. So I watched as many as I could because I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to show, hey, you know what? I apologize though about the mispronunciation of your name. That was my New York accent
Don't worry,
coming in.
it happens.
But the point is that you've accomplished so much. And I'm not just blowing smoke, because you can go on YouTube, just put in a search for your name. It'll all come up. But so what are your goals then? Not just in NBPW, but going forward. Tomorrow, big show, no fun done. So, you've done all this stuff, but what's left to prove, and what are some of the goals here upcoming for you?
To be honest, it's a very good question. I don't exactly know. I think I'm just going with the flow. I am going with the flow. I'm not going to be doing this full time because, to be honest, over the lockdown period, I got myself physically fitter than I've ever been in my whole life.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but you changed. I mean,
Yeah.
you changed from years back, but you look like another person almost. You look like you're in better shape now than when I watched you against JD Knight in like 2008. I'm like, wow.
Absolutely. And the health benefits, obviously, there are a lot of benefits. And I don't exactly want to be taking bumps, doing the miles every weekend or full time and putting myself back into that position where I was, because it took a lot of work to get myself back to the health that I should be. I'm now 37 years old and I feel like I'm 20. I could go for years and years if I wanted to. Like you pointed out, I've been in the ring with a lot of people. I'm always open to be in the ring with more. I'm always looking for competition. I'm always looking to challenge myself. And when I'm in the ring, if I don't get to challenge myself, I kind of feel down about it, because I'm like, well, I don't feel like I'm getting the opportunity to reach my true potential. That's why being in the ring with the likes of No Fun Done, the Wonder Kid Johnny Storm, and countless others, where I get to get in there and kind of get to grips with that and show people what I can really do. I think more than anything, I'm trying to prove to myself that I'm better than I actually thought I was all those years ago.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting. You're always trying to outdo yourself. That's a good point, because it's funny. I interviewed a lot of musicians, and some of my friends had record deals and stuff, and they'll always say, well, Tom, there's always somebody out there that's better than me, and I'm always trying to evolve. I'm always trying to improve as a musician. I think in a lot of ways, as a wrestler, it's the same thing. And, coming back to MBPW a second, we had, obviously, our last guest from MBPW was the juggernaut John Allens, who's the king of old school champion. Now, you mentioned Mr. Allens, and I know that Mr. Allens will be back on Sportswire very soon, and I was wondering, I mean, obviously you guys have squared off in the past, and certainly he's a guy that I think takes a different path than you take these days, the Warrior Paul Malen. So, I mean, is that a guy that you'd like to be back in the ring with? And certainly, is that somebody that you have an eye on, especially as you talked about that King of Old School title that he won at the Rumble at Bank Holiday a couple weeks ago? I mean, what's your thoughts on that and Mr. Allens?
I mean, first of all, I wouldn't like to be back in the ring with him, because that guy has a mean right hook.
I tell you, I watched his match, I think 2 years ago with Tommy Rocker, and I didn't get a chance to see this one yet, but I mean, just that match alone, I could see that he's definitely an old school kind of guy that gives it out there in a old stiff kind of way. Let me put it that way.
Mean right hook.
Yep.
Every shot you feel, every slam you certainly feel. So it's not exactly a walk in the park, but like I pointed out, I'm always open for competition. And that King of Old School championship, I would love to be the King of Old School. So if it means going through John Allens to get it, the juggernaut, then I'll have to do that, I'm afraid.
I guess in a way, wouldn't you be the definition of the King of Old School? Because at this point now you are the veteran. So maybe that title rings more to you than anything else, not to take away from Mr. Rocker. And obviously Mr. Rocker is, we're going to see Team Rocker versus Team Kirby, but maybe you fit that title to a T more so than the Juggernaut himself.
Tom, you are a genius. You just said it. I don't need to say it. You are a genius.
Okay, well, certainly I'm actually the second person to that today, but I'm going to plead the fifth on that, because it's not about me. It's your show here tonight. And also, Sculla says Paul Malen needs a Hall of Fame ring. Yeah, if there's a true Hall of Fame, because I know WWE has this Hall of Fame, but it's almost like there's actually no place that they have a Hall of Fame for. So maybe if there was like a wrestling Hall of Fame, a worldwide wrestling Hall of Fame, certainly you would be one of those candidates that we would all like to induct at the top. But I mean, you have held more than a dozen championships. I mean, I heard an interview you said at the time you had 12 championships. You probably have won at least 6 or 7 more since then. So, I mean, is there a championship that is one that maybe was the most notable for you, or the one that meant the most in your career? I know it's a lot. I know we're talking, I mean, I've had a lot of wrestlers here on Sportswire, and, some of them held multiple titles at one time. I even heard one time you were Kenny Omega before Kenny Omega. You had 5 championships at once. I mean, I had Disciple on a bunch of times, and Disciple had 2 world titles at once, but you had 5 championships at once. So the first thing is, I mean, how are you getting around with 5 championships here? First champ. And on the second part, what was that like? And just anything else you want to share about that experience?
Man, I had a hell of a mantle at one point. Championship titles everywhere. I was thinking more like Ultimo Dragon, the photograph.
Yeah.
No, but Kenny Omega, I'll take that. But just to be clear, if you're getting in the ring expecting to see me perform like Kenny Omega, you will be sadly mistaken right there. Championships for me. One was the was one with the longest reign, which was 456 days.
Wow.
And that was the
Okay.
Southside Wrestling Tag Team Championships, because
With,
I'm a huge fan.
with Joe Connors, if I'm not mistaken.
Joseph
right?
Connors. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling. Some of my favorite tag teams, the Andersons, the Brainbusters. You can see the pattern kind of trending. If it's involving Arn Anderson, then I'm totally into
absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
And
sure.
a huge fan of tag team wrestling. And to me, that is one of my biggest accomplishments, because it's one of the times when I had the most fun and I enjoyed it.
I could see that. Listen, and what's that like? The difference then is a tag and a singles guy. You've obviously been massive in both, but I mean, for your style, I got a chance to watch a lot of your stuff. I mean, how are you different in a tag setting than in a singles?
For me, I absolutely love tag team wrestling, but sometimes there is nothing worse than watching bad tag team wrestling. And with this,
well, what's the line they use? That's almost becomes bathroom break material in a show.
For me, for example, a tag team should be able to predict what is going to happen. And for me, a tag team partner should be able to know automatically where I'm going to be and be there ready for that tag if it needs to happen. And I've only experienced that once. That was with Joseph Connors in the Predators. And since then, watching tag team wrestling, being a part of tag team wrestling, you constantly find yourself comparing it to that. Like, man, I wish it was as organic as it felt then, or I wish it was as perfect as it felt back then. But you can't find that. And for me, tag team wrestling is an art form, just the same as singles, but tag team wrestling is harder because there's 4 of you, there's 6 of you, there's 8 of you, there's 10 of you. How many people are in this tag team match? It's easier with 2 people. With a tag team match, you've got 4 people in there, different styles, maybe contrasting styles, maybe people that are too heated in the moment and wanting to fight instead of wrestle. For me, tag team wrestling, loved it back in the day. Right now, though, I am looking to really test myself in singles, really looking for something to get my teeth sunk into.
Well, I certainly think that NBPW will be one of those places that I think will see your teeth that'll sink into some of that action. June the 30th, also July the 28th. We have another show coming up here, so certainly a lot of places will see it. But I also want to talk about also your fitness coaching, and I wanted to make sure I promote that before I come back here to some other things, get to closing thoughts. So talk about, because you kind of talked about how you've made this adjustment where we see you in arguably the best shape you've ever been in, and talk about that, because I think that's important, because you talked about mental health earlier on, and talk about what you do with your fitness and coaching, which everybody can please follow on Instagram and get involved with PB Fitness and Coaching, because anybody from any age, shape, or level can connect with you and improve your body, and also that mental health aspect. So talk about that and what got you involved in starting that.
Cool. Thank you for the shout out also. So for me, my background with fitness is I haven't been doing this for a long time. A year, maybe a little bit more. But for me, my fitness journey is one that I can imagine countless people watching or listening to this, or anybody around the world has experienced at the same time. For me, when the pandemic hit and I find myself stationary, not being able to do anything, it's kind of like all the years of wrestling caught up with me, and I found my body wilting, withering, and I was in so much pain because I stopped. It's strange going from full-time active wrestling, never stopping. The second you stop is when all of those aches and pains catch up with you. And my mindset was, God, what am I going to do? I need some help. So I had a personal trainer, Dan Bryden, who's also a former wrestler. He helped me massively, truly opened my eyes to what good diet, working out the correct way, and truly looking after yourself actually means. And it's kind of like, I've never looked back since. And everybody always sees fitness as the pictures, the poses and stuff. And it's not, it's more so here, your health, and up here mentally. And for me, it's kind of like, I had a lot of help along the way from other trainers also. I started doing yoga. I need to actually get back into that. But yoga helped me massively with my
and we know from DDP Yoga that yoga transformed a lot of wrestling. I mean, Chris Jericho said once, I think on his podcast, that if it wasn't for DDP Yoga, he would have retired years ago. So yoga, people years ago when we were growing up, people would have said, yoga, what are you doing? But now yoga is like a really big thing in terms of helping your body, that kind of elastics almost.
100%. For me, though, right now we're working with people with PB fitness and coaching. I find a lot of people, and they all suffer with the same as what I did. And not everybody needs like pushing too much. They just need that little bit of pushing in the right direction, saying, listen, you can do this. And I don't like to keep people for too long. I like to educate them in the sense that sooner or later, after a little while, they can go off and they can do this on their own. As I've had a few people do that. And there's no better feeling than seeing that. Seeing somebody's changed their lives like I have, and kind of like paying it forward. So somebody did something good for me. I'm trying to do something good for countless others also. So that's what PB Fitness and Coaching is all about.
And that's why I want everybody again to please follow PB Fitness and Coaching. Please do that on Instagram. Also, Paul Malen 1 on Instagram, Aspire Wrestling Alliance, and also NBP Wrestling as well. Please follow all those great places, and those are places where you can get that help. And it reminds me almost of the wrestler I've had on here in the past, the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus, a guy that also started his wrestling career late, but wasn't in the shape that he would have liked, and all of a sudden he starts his own company during COVID, and next thing you know, he's in the shape like you're in, very similar. So great stuff there. And our friends over at NBPW say Paul will be a great contender for the NBP tag titles once they are introduced. Is there someone at NBP that you would like to team with? That's a great question, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on it there, Mr. Malen.
That is a good question. Hey, maybe me and the juggernaut John Allens, instead of being in a ring against each other, maybe we can combine our fists and beat some other people up, maybe.
Well, I'll tell you what. You want to talk about the forces colliding with the King of Old School champion, the juggernaut John Allens, and the warrior Paul Malen, the earth will more than rumble.
The mega powers.
I think it'd be like times 10, because I think about what you guys do in the ring and what could be. I mean, listen, your opponents, certainly, they're going to be in for a world of hurt. You guys will be, as the old adage would be saying, cruising for a bruising. So somebody will be getting. I try here. Skulls says that he'll take Paul Malen on for fitness, and Skulls, again, PB Fitness and Coaching. Please make sure you go there on Instagram and give Mr. Malen a shout out, and Mr. Malen will certainly set you up here. But, before I get to closing thoughts here and ask you one or two more things on NBPW, maybe a thought on also tomorrow's opponent, No Fun Done. I mean, I have to ask you, because I've watched your match with Doug Williams. Doug Williams, I know him from Impact Wrestling because I was an American. I was actually a TNA fan, so I watched a lot of those old TNA days back on Spike TV here in America, certainly Access TV now, but I am well ingrained with Doug Williams. You've also wrestled Davey Boy Smith Jr., which is like everybody knows Davey Boy Smith Jr., and everyone and their mother knows him. JD Knight, you obviously had some legendary wars, kind of like your first big thing for you. But, talk about what you learned from those experiences. You were in there with legends. I mean, legends and guys that people know, just casual wrestling fans know these individuals. So talk to me about those experiences and what they were like.
Those experiences were amazing. And I simply cannot put into words how grateful I was to be able to work with people that I've grown up watching. You just mentioned Doug Williams. When I was a teen, I was watching Doug Williams on Ring of Honor and on the Wrestling Channel, which was a big thing on Sky TV over here back in the day. And getting to work with him, I always wanted to tell him, you were a big inspiration for me. If he's watching, hopefully, maybe. But he's a massive inspiration for me. But working with the likes of the Native American Tatanka, the franchise Shane Douglas, which was a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me. Tracy Smothers, he was one of my first.
I know Tracy Smothers very well. He was kind of like the guy, almost like
Tracy Smothers.
Almost like in that Barry Horowitz kind of lane, almost.
Oh, he was so nice also. Yep. The Cowboy James Storm, Davey Boy Smith Jr., countless others. Do you know the main thing I learned? To adapt. Adapt to every different opponent. Be ready to listen. Be ready to work. And be ready to put in the action when you needed to. You had to be ready. There was no time to be anxious about anything back then for me. It's kind of like, okay, Paul, you're in this situation. You either sink or you swim. And I was ready to swim. I never wanted to sink with this. I never wanted to look bad. I never wanted to make the promotion or the promoter look bad for putting me in that position also.
I was curious because if I'm not mistaken, when you wrestled Doug Williams, wasn't that right before the first time he retired? So I thought
he
that
was
was
in a very bad way.
Yeah,
he was in a very bad way.
So what was that like to almost, you were one of his last opponents when he retired at the time. I mean, what was that experience? That had to be no pressure, right? Because it's Doug Williams and he's, pretty much on that retirement tour. I was curious what that was like 5 years ago.
Oh, again, very grateful for the opportunity to work with him. I'd really love for another opportunity to do that because I think now the two of us are in much better shape.
Yep.
I think we can really go with it again. But no, it was great. It was fantastic. Really appreciated the opportunity to work with him. And sadly, I didn't win that time. So hopefully, if we have a rematch,
I wasn't going to bring that up. I've learned one thing on Sportswire. We have all the different wrestlers on. Never to mention if they didn't win a match, never mention that aspect. But, I did want to ask in the sense that you have all these guys you shared a locker room with. Tatanka, the Native American Tatanka. I know Tatanka very well. Shane Douglas. I think Sabu you've also squared across with in an apron. I mean, it's along with Davey Boy Smith Jr. I mean, he was basically born into royalty in British wrestling. All these different names. And I was curious, not so much on the wins and losses, but I always ask somebody like this, especially in yourself, because you're now kind of, like you said, paying it forward, especially to the young locker room, some of them at NBPW. What advice did you get from them that you took away from those experiences that maybe you used for yourself, but most importantly now in the different places you're in, like in NBPW? So what would you learn from those veterans that you take away to try to give back to others with?
For me, to be respectful, again, when you're working with people like that, if you pester people and you pressure them, then they aren't really going to take kindly to that. For me, it taught me to be ready, to always look the part, which sometimes professional wrestling now, I don't think enough is put into these characters. Sometimes somebody's a character and you can kind of see through it because they're not really that character they want to be, but they're not focusing on themselves amplified times 10. That's one of the main pieces of advice that I had, like not be afraid to push forward, but also not be afraid to look stupid by asking questions. After, like you pointed out with criticism, for me, to be involved in professional wrestling, you have to have a very thick skin because it's not very often you're going to get told you're doing things right. The best lessons are from those that you get told that you're wrong or you're learning from something there. That's the main thing I took from all of the people that I work with.
Absolutely. I can certainly see why that. And again, legendary guys and certainly wrestlers that need no introduction. So I realize we only have so much time. So I wanted to come back to NPBW for a couple different things here. First is I want to ask you, do you have maybe any final words or anything you want to say before we move on to closing thoughts to one Johnny Storm? Anything you want to say to Mr. Storm before you square off in the ring with him in 2 weeks?
I mean, if this is a message personally to Johnny, I've not seen you in a very, very long time. And I am very much looking forward to getting in the ring with you and seeing where we can go. You're working against a very different wrestler to back in the day, and I hope you're ready for that because I'm coming to work hard.
What do you want to say to anybody that's going to go out and watch you on the 30th? And to anybody that's watching this and now may think about watching or maybe consider following you that hasn't already?
Anybody that's watched this, I'm always open to answering messages. Feel free to contact me in regards to anything wrestling or fitness. You will get an answer. No problem with that. Again, to anybody that's a fan of mine, I appreciate you all. Thank you very much. You can see me in action tomorrow against No Fun Done for the Aspire Wrestling Alliance in Derby. You can see me in action for MVP on June the 30th against the Wonder Kid Johnny Storm at their anniversary show. And believe you me, I'm coming in there, all guns blazing, ready to take the big W.
All right, I got two last questions. The first was I have to ask you because obviously I mentioned one of my old friends, Reynaldo. Reynaldo actually came to New York last year, and I met Reynaldo. And Reynaldo's obviously another veteran and somebody I rushed upon. I think it just started in 2005, also like you. So I have to ask because I'll probably let him know that I spoke with you, and because we speak from time to time. I know he's a busy man these days; he's got a family and such. But I mean, do you have any memories of being across the apron with Reynaldo?
I do, yeah, I do. I remember him being very good. I don't think we got to do it often, maybe once or twice.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I think it was only 1 or 2 times you guys were
Yeah.
involved in any type of match. But I was just curious if there was anything that you remember of Ronaldo. Obviously,
No, I just
Ronaldo.
remember him being very polite, very talented.
That's him. He's very, for a guy that's obviously done a lot of different things, very soft-spoken, very
Yeah.
mild-mannered, and that's why we love Ronaldo. But I want to ask you one more question before closing thoughts. And I know you've had a lot of moments in your career. You have done a lot of different things, 40-plus different promotions, more than a dozen championships. You've got your own company. You're a fitness instructor now. You've pretty much done everything. But I always like to ask this question, especially to important people like yourself, because you are definitely one of the more important people that we've had. I've interviewed athletes, I've interviewed, politicians, entertainers. So you're definitely in that category. So I truly mean that. It's an honor certainly to have someone like yourself that has had the resume that you've had. And I got a chance. I'm glad to watch some of that here before we came on. But is there 1 or 2 moments in your very, very decorated career that may stand out most?
For me, getting to work with Danny Boy Collins. If you've ever heard of Danny Boy Collins, he is one of the all-time greats of British wrestling. Got to work him at the Bridlington Spa, and I believe that was one of his last matches. And being able to get in there with a man that was in his 50s, performing like a man that was in his 20s, it truly inspired me. And the feedback I got from him afterwards was sometimes you're stood across against somebody in the ring and you just know you're going to be fine. You may not know them, but you'll know you'll be good. He had that feeling. And I was like, for me, that there's no better compliment, because since I started, all I ever wanted to be was good at something. All I ever wanted to be was good at professional wrestling. And that's still what I strive to be now. As long as somebody comes back saying, wow, Paul Malen was fun to watch, or Paul Malen was great to work with, that's all I've ever wanted from this.
Well, you definitely did that. I've listened. And you really wrestled in some, big places. You wrestled in front of thousands of fans, and you've wrestled guys again that are main event stars in worldwide companies, been champions. I mean, listen, Doug Williams himself. I mean, he was in a group with Ric Flair. I mean, you're talking like royalty itself, and he's arguably one of the biggest names in British wrestling ever. And you mentioned Davey Boy Smith Jr. I mean, again, that's the name alone that speaks for itself. And you mentioned Tatanka. I mean, so we could go on, all day. I thought that was certainly a great answer and great questions. It has been a tremendous honor to have you, and I want to thank NBPW. I want to take the time to thank the owner of the promoter of the company for giving me the opportunity to speak with someone as accomplished as you. So I know you're a busy man, and you get ready for tomorrow's show. Also, the 30th here at NBPW. Tickets are still available. Please go to NBP Wrestling on Instagram, also Facebook as well. So I want to give you now the floor. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to plug, share, say? And I hope to get a chance to speak with you again one day. It has been an absolute honor, and I can't thank you enough. So I turn it over to you for any closing thoughts, anything else you want to plug, share, say, and the floor is yours now.
First of all, Tom, thank you very much. You're truly amazing at this. You are absolutely on it, which is very rare with professional wrestling. It's very rare with somebody interviewing you either, but you've been absolutely amazing for this. Thank you very much. Again, anybody wanting to follow me, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Paul Malen. PB Fitness and Coaching is my platform for my fitness brand. And with that, you can catch me in action for MVP June the 30th against the Wonder Kid Johnny Storm. Any further shows, you keep updated on my social media. You can catch it all there. Thank you very much for watching this. And anybody wanting to get into professional wrestling, get in touch or find a good wrestling training school, a good one.
Well, one of those places could very well be the Aspire Wrestling Alliance. And even if you are in the United States, certainly consider to go out there and see Paul Malen, but most importantly, see him in action coming up tomorrow night against No Fun Done over at Aspire Wrestling Alliance. And also June the 30th, anniversary, NBPW. You're going to see him against the Wonder Kid Johnny Storm in a dream match, a match that has been a long time in the making. Once again, you're going to see that plus a lot more. It's going to be a great show. And thank you so much for the opportunity. It has been a tremendous pleasure. I hope to have you on again here one day soon.
I'd love that.
Thank you for the. Well, I hope we can make that happen. Certainly, ladies and gentlemen, we were here on Sportswire Radio with the legendary, the Warrior Paul Malen. He has won countless championships, wrestled in countless places, a who's who of people, and he was here with us to share some of his experiences. Please follow him again, Paul Malen on Instagram. Also, please check him out at Aspire Wrestling Alliance, PB Fitness Coaching, NBP Wrestling on Instagram as well. And if you're you're on sportnarium.com/play, go back to your regularly scheduled programming. I'll be back here 10 p.m. Eastern time with a full slate of guys from the IMF. The IMF Wrestling has their big show tomorrow in Iowa. The Rage in the Cage, also July 1st as well. So stay tuned for all that. But my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. I am the man behind Sportswire Radio. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the number one global radio station that is Sportswire.